So you and I have had I've had the pleasure, you've had the frustration of working with me on many games over many, many years. Um,
Yes.
and as we reach out to some of the places you've had enormous impact on things like Shadowrun over the years, really uh, being from kind of second edition on. I mean, there was a good 10 years or so that property was in your care and feeding. Um, you know, when you think about the kind of story nature of Shadowrun, obviously pretty different than what we're doing here in Sea of Legends. But what would you think would be is there anything in this game you think it would be of interesting for Shadowrun players?
For Shadowrun players, well, there's a couple things that's actually kind of cool. So if you strip out, as you well know, or maybe we did a whole section on cyber piracy in Shadowrun.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, we did a lot of the background. That's you can never say one-to-one because that's our whole point was to make it a little different, and this is making it a little different. But the whole concept of the way, the piracy is, as you well know, is one of my favorite things ever. And what's kind of cool about what is here is the NPC nature of the monsters. Because what you're doing in Shadowrun had all the spirits and the various elements that could come alive. Here they're there, and it's a foregone conclusion, and all that kind of stuff like we would have to do in Shadowrun. But that supernatural feel of the reality of the world of being a pirate, followed the Spanish blah blah blah, followed by it. But the fact that all of a sudden you're triggering
Right. So we were just talking about Shadowrun, cyber piracy, love of piracy,
right,
and how the NPCs work in this game.
Yeah. So the cool thing about what I really liked about the game was the supernatural flair. So if you take it back to Shadowrun and the pirates, pirates are pirates. We all kind of get that image in our brain one way or another. But what was cool in this, in what kind of feels always familiar to me, is taking the pirates and then putting that twist on it. We did it with Shadowrun where we put kind of the modern twist, but we also reached all the way back to that whole spirits and the nature of the sea and the mysteries of various artifacts and all that stuff. And you have that built totally into the game already. So, that's always cool to me to see the piracy core, the heart, with the trappings of elements from here or there, the cyber, the what did you say, the undead pirates, and then there's the sea people, and
the Harpies. We've got also. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because we were talking about that internally, and I was saying to Zach and Ryan that the original tagline for Shadowrun is like where man meets machine and magic.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I was saying, so it would be fun to do this one where wooden ships and iron men meet monsters of mythology.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what Shadowrun did, and this is doing it as well, and in the same kind of spirit, of that, like, that kind of like. It sounds so stupid, but to say like the realism of the fiction of the world is set up with that already built in, so it doesn't feel odd. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't feel like, oh look, they added miniatures to it just to do this thing. No, it's built in. You're finding these rare mystical artifacts, and the rare mystical artifact, boom, happens. And by doing this, you've unlaunched the undead zombies. Or the, you've angered the sea creatures to now come out, and it's integrated totally both in the board game play with in the look and feel with the cool miniatures and the regular miniatures and the giant miniatures, as well as the storyline in that you're getting fed to you through the app, the choices that you're making, and and I think in some cases even like the decisions that you're making with gear and crew, and how you're going to, can I fight these things? Can I not fight these things? How do I defeat them smartly, if you will, by like using, like I was doing when I was playing a solo game, by getting the Spanish to do my dirty work, and then taking it on to try to do the thing. I think in my game, we ended it. There are two main villains out, and I think I got to the point where I was able to corral one of them. But that was a choice. Again, you like got stories going on. Do I bother? Does it bother me? And I can imagine if you're playing with multiple players and I can force trouble on you while I stay safe. Hey, piracy. Last man standing. So that was.
I think also there. The Shadowrun card game that you did that was so cool. That was one of the very early kind of. Builds a dungeon kind of experience with the card deck, and obviously the app gives us a lot more we can do there to really create really rich stories. But there's kind of a connection between that kind of collaborative against the system that you did in that card game.
Yeah, the cool thing about the card game was you were making both card game decisions and story decisions. And in this game, I got the feeling that the cool thing is the story is not like, now go do this. The story is you can do this, or you can do this, or you can do this third thing. Now all of a sudden, I'm still creating the story. And, I'm creating the story through choices. And that's very different than any board game out there right now. As you now know, people maybe don't know, is that's what I do now for a living, is I make board games. And I know what's out there and what people are playing, and the ability to have choices and make different decisions, but still maintain the whole fiction. That's really hard to do at the board game level. That's, the purview of the RPG, if you will. But in this game, you had that choice, and that's really cool. I mean, that's just not done. I mean, that is a unique feather in the cap of this game.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you. Let's see. One last question. One of the other games we had the pleasure of working on was together was Pirates of the Spanish Main, which certainly, if you're going to excuse the pun, plies the same waters as this game does. Any thoughts on how the two games compare and contrast?
Well, what we did really well, and it started with your ball rolling, was we want to take history and we want to go, how do we use what happened in history, because history is always full of really interesting characters doing really interesting stuff. But how do we then introduce other characters into that so that they're mixing together kind of like, very holistic, big time storyline? So that every time we came out with a new release or a new update, we would have this kind of rolling story, but still maintaining that historical foothold. This game does that. It does the same thing. I just thought it was really clever how the story elements, like I said, I had the story person was that I had was Annette was my villain. She was a Spanish noble. So all the things that were happening in her storyline were realistic, and maybe, as far as I know, without doing any research, a historical accurate person. But the fact is, it wasn't so, the oddity, the fiction, the crazy world stuff was not the part of the storyline. That was part of like the overall game feel. The storyline, though, felt real. She was doing something. You could see, what do I have on her? Why does she want me to, what's going on here? It becomes almost like you're part of someone's personal story. That's what I thought we did really well with Pirates of the Spanish Main. It's why it took off and people really loved it, was because we had really cool miniature ships that you built, but people were reading the stories on the cards that were like done in like 17 words, because that's all we can fit on a card. But we were making
the length of the story I can write, behind that.
We were making really cool stories in 17, in 2 sentences. And I think that this does that same thing. It tells, you're in that story. You're like 3 choices in, you're like, oh man, what is going on here? What is she up to? What's happening? And you're thinking not necessarily what the player to my right or left is. You're trying to figure out your story, your connection between your story and your character and your role. That's the holy grail in board games. You know,
we were playing a session with Randall, and his story started off with he's out in the town in the marketplace with his lover, and someone comes up and slips him a note, says from an admirer, and he has a choice of showing his lover that or reading or keeping it secret.
Yeah, exactly.
And he keeps it secret, and of course that takes him down a trail, which eventually ends up with him sacrificing his lover to the zombie conquistador god. So yeah, it went it went kind of dark, which was very fitting for Randall.
It's probably true. I know Randall, and that sounds logical, actually. But that was what I was really in. So what's really interesting is I played solo, so I didn't have other people that I was dialoguing with. But here it is, whatever it is, a month later, 6 weeks later, I could still tell you my story. I could still tell you in that story. I didn't get very far in my lover's story because I chose not to, because this other story was impacting my ability to even investigate my lover's story, because my nemesis had the Spanish all over me from like turn 2, or second story option. So that's really cool. That immersive gameplay brings people back to the table a second, third, fourth, fifth time, as they go, what else could happen? What else is here? What other storyline is here? And I'm not telling you any trade secrets, because you already know that's really ripe to continue to have a living product. To say, okay, you know what? It's been out for a year. We've updated some stories.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden people are like back playing the game, buying the next expansion, doing something else. No, you got a cool model. It's a cool model.
All right, well, that's great. I anything else, Ryan or Zach or Dubo? I think you gave us some great sound bites in there, sir.
I hope so. I hope it's super successful. I really enjoyed it. Good job, Zach. Good job, Ryan. Oh, and Jordan, you too, I guess I should say.